Good afternoon, everybody. It is my very great pleasure today to present the 2018 Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Fiction to author Natalie Morrill for her stunning first novel, The Ghost Keeper. What struck the jury most about this singular book is the combination of the beautifully lyrical language, the deft storytelling, and the deeply original approach to its subject matter. Set primarily in Vienna from the end of World War I to the aftermath of World War II, it is above all a story about memory, but in the circuitous way that memory actually works, traveling first this way, then that, then back to the beginning. It is a story about the Holocaust, but on a very intimate level, about a family torn apart, and about two close friends, one Jewish, one not, who take very different paths. It is a book about the finding of faith and holding a connection to those who are long dead, but somehow are still present. Multi-layered and multifaceted, The Ghost Keeper is also about finding the love of one's life and holding on in the face of brutal circumstances beyond their control. In this intricately woven tapestry of family, love, friendship, loss, and betrayal, of people's ability to do both good and bad, and the terrible choices they find themselves making to survive, the author never drops a narrative thread. Natalie Morrill holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of British Columbia. Her writing has appeared in Canadian literary journals and has also been included in the Journey Prize Stories anthology. The Ghost Keeper has also received the HarperCollins Canada UBC Prize for Best New Fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming this year's Fiction Prize winner, Natalie Morrill.
Thank you, first of all, so much to the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, the judges, the jury, the sponsors for all of this, for recognizing my book in this incredible way, and for inviting me to be among all of these authors and readers today. I'm completely honored. And thanks also in a huge way to my publisher, Patrick Queen Editions at HarperCollins Canada, for submitting my book for consideration for this wonderful award, and for believing in it the whole way along. It means so much to me that The Ghost Keeper received the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Fiction. This book is my first novel, and it's a work of historical fiction, as Andrea introduced it to you, set mainly in Vienna in Austria in the period between the two world wars and then after the Second World War. Several people have asked me why I was drawn to this particular setting and this particular period in history when I was writing this book. When I was a child, I lived in Vienna, and the Währing Cemetery, which is one of the cemeteries at the heart of this story, and which I'm going to read a brief description of at the start of the book, was very near to our house where I grew up. My memory of it, I would say, is more or less as it's described in the book. It was surrounded by tall brick walls, topped with broken glass and barbed wire, and the gate was always locked. In fact, the only times I ever saw inside were if one of my parents would lift me up to look over the wall. Inside, I remember seeing toppled gravestones overgrown with vines and weeds. The image itself was very, very striking to me as a child, but on top of that, I suspect my parents did their best to explain to me why the cemetery was the way it was. That is to say, why there wasn't a significant community to look after it, why the gate had to remain locked against vandals, and why it wasn't made more accessible and visible to locals and to tourists. This likely would have been around the same time when I was first coming to understand what the Holocaust was, and I think I got these two things, this 19th century Jewish cemetery and the millions of deaths during that period of history, conflated in my mind as a young person. And so I think that conflation was the source of this story, realizing that while there wasn't necessarily the literal connection that I imagined as a 6-year-old, there was in fact a very resonant connection between these two, between the hiddenness, the forgottenness, and the neglect of that particular cemetery and the genocide that occurred in the 20th century. So out of those associations arose this story. I'll say before I read briefly from the first page that this book never would have existed if I hadn't been able to work with my supervisor, Ria Tregobov at UBC. She was absolutely instrumental in guiding me as I wrote the early drafts of this book, in encouraging me and helping me to understand if I was doing the subject matter justice. And I also wanted to say briefly that I was so grateful to have Nancy Richler blurb this book. It meant so much to me to have her read the book and admire it, and I was heartbroken that she passed away before I was able to thank her in person, but it's always going to be incredible to me that her name is on the back of my book. So I'm just going to read the first page. Under the pines in the Währing Cemetery, a fox carries the rib of a man in his teeth. He has a burrow under the east wall, and he gives me no end of trouble, this fox. I've seen him in the sun, trotting princely atop the brick wall, and his black toes are never cut on the glass, and his red coat is never caught on the barbed wire. I have seen him in the rain, too, under the trees and along the inner wall, with a vole or mouse or brown collarbone in his mouth and his red coat dripping. And I have seen him in the snow, when he is a streak of light and a bolt of God. Then I can't chase him off. He is a miracle. But on this day he's a bone thief, and I can yell, "Shoo!" and run at him with my arms flapping, and hope that he drops the rib as he scampers so I can bury it again. No one comes here anymore. Only the fox and the birds, and only me. The ground is like a beast breathing slowly, and the tree roots writhing and stirring the earth, and the headstones tumbled all in a heap here and there. The wall and the broken glass and the barbed wire keep the vandals out, all but a few, ready to be scratched raw to spray something hateful on a toppled marker, and most of that from some years ago, I think. Years ago now. Thank you.